Hey, sleepyheads. Pop quiz. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the name Sacagawea? If you guessed anything regarding Lewis and Clark, then of course you are not alone. But as always, can we complicate that? I think we can. Let's get into it. It's your girl, Miss Missing My Bed, and today we are diving into the woman behind the most famous expedition in American history. But of course, let us begin with our core concept. Today's core concept is erasure. Erasure happens when history reduces someone to a single role, leaving out the fullness of who they were and everything that they survived. And that is particularly true for the story of Sacagawea. Today I'm sharing 5 things that made my students say, wait, why didn't we learn that before? And as you can imagine, it's going to get a little crazy. So thanks for joining along for the ride. Number 1, she was actually kidnapped as a child. So before Sacagawea ever met Lewis and Clark, she was a young Limhi Shoshone girl around the age of 11 or 12 that essentially got caught up in this intertribal conflict. So she was then taken away from her homeland. So this is important context because you have to understand that she's already experienced displacement, separation from her family, and just this idea of this disconnection that's happening even at such a young age. 2, she was indeed a teen mom. So Sacagawea was around 16 years old when she gave birth to her son, Jean Baptiste. And of course, just a few weeks later, she was joining Lewis and Clark on the expedition, carrying this newborn into a brand new territory. So it's really, really fascinating because most of us are familiar with Sacagawea because she's on the coin. You see this beautiful baby tucked behind her, but we don't actually really know a lot of the context of her story outside of that. Currently in the US, ideally, mothers are getting a few months after childbirth to just deal with bringing a new life into the world, taking care of themselves, and allowing their body to completely recover. And in this situation, we have a 16-year-old who is fresh from giving birth to her first child and is expected to go on this adventure of the unknown and somehow take care of her baby, take care of herself, and be what she's expected to be in terms of being the guide in the Lewis and Clark journey. What does that say? What does that mean when we have this expectation, even then, of young girls being able to have to navigate society in this really complex way just because they are a woman? And in this case, a Native woman. So I want y'all to really think about that as we get into the other details of her story. Number 4, Lewis and Clark didn't actually discover the West. This is where we have to challenge another dominant narrative. Lewis and Clark couldn't have completed their expedition without indigenous nations, right? There were people already there, okay? Native communities were providing food. They were offering directions. They were offering geographic knowledge, even offering trade, right? So there was a lot happening. The West wasn't an empty wilderness waiting to be discovered. And we know that this is true and indicative of our society as a whole. So maybe the better question is, who was actually leading whom? Number 5, while we don't actually know her story in depth oftentimes, we have seen her in so many different places. As I said earlier, she is on the US dollar coin, but she's often also seen and her name is used for schools, parks, statues, and there is also a trail in her name. So of course I have to ask the question, how often do we actually learn about the young indigenous girl behind all of these images? How often do we learn about her kidnapping, her resilience, her motherhood at 16, and her role as a cultural bridge? Remembering someone's face isn't the same as remembering their story, and history deserves much more than just symbols. So before I get into our homework, I want us to remember that her story and her life were complex, and she is a valued human being, not just as a Native woman, but as someone who had a real life and who did so much for society. And I always want to make sure that we're honoring, especially the women, in this series. And now for extra credit. Across the United States and Canada, Indigenous women and girls continue to experience disproportionately high rates of violence, disappearance, and homicide, as similar to the story of Pocahontas. This is an ongoing crisis, and we know that this is called the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Your homework is to continue to research the names of these women who've gone missing, learn their stories, and tell someone else about it. Now, I'm always looking for more ways to engage with history and engage with different people and community and movements in history. So if there's something that you feel like we should take a deeper look at, please drop it in the comments and I will look forward to the feedback. See y'all next class.